As part of the sandwich generation, you have been tasked with the leadership of a family system that has never existed in humanity's history. You have the responsibility to not only have, most likely, like we talked about last week, a dual family or dual working parents, children in multiple activities, plus the aging of your parents, all while trying to do everything else that is on your plate. It is important that I give you the structure to be able to walk your family through in leadership, in honesty, and setting an example so that when you get to your own aging journey, you will already know what needs to happen to protect your relationship with your children and to protect their relationship with each other. This system is not just about taking care of your parents. It is about creating a generational trust that breeds more trust between you and your children and creates a legacy to be able to lead your family through the life cycle, not just for your generation, not for your parents' generation, but for all the generations to come. One of the earliest signs of lost independence is actually all the way back to a clinical diagnosis. What I find is that a lot of families receive a clinical diagnosis for one of the aging parents, and that cascades through chronic disease into a loss of independence. What's fascinating is that there are ways where we can start that conversation way back when we're in our 40s of what do we want to do to care for ourselves, how do we want this aging process to look, and how is this going to adapt as the family changes, creating a structure in order to prevent any type of chaos down the road. Adult children avoid asking their parents a couple of questions that end up causing chaos down the road. And they're not that hard, actually. The first question is, what do you expect of me? And that feels like a really heavy question. But the foundation of a lot of conflict really comes down to unmet expectations. If your parents are relying on something to happen, you to take care of something, and you don't explicitly know that, you are not going to meet their expectations. And the reverse is also true. If you have expected for them to prepare for their aging journey and they haven't, that is a conflict ready to happen. So the question to avoid that one is, what have you done to prepare? Avoiding the questions creates conflict down the road. Avoiding asking your parents, what do you expect of me in your aging journey, creates conflict, misunderstandings, and so much anger between siblings. The reverse is also true. If adult children have not asked their parents, what have you done to prepare for your aging journey? We expect that they have done more than they have, which creates resentment, anger, and frustration when we get to that darkened hallway in the hospital and we're fighting with our siblings over how we're going to take care of dad. Many adult children tell me that they're very scared that they're just going to end up taking over their parents' lives because they don't think that they're doing well. And that's why I created this system. This system helps you avoid, just like we talked about last week, losing autonomy too early or too late, because we create an assessment. This assessment removes emotion and fear and expectations from what we assess our parents to be capable of doing. What I have created gives you clear guidance on how we help and how we don't overstep. It is an important piece that we are allowing people to do as much for themselves as they can. Otherwise, we have atrophy, we have breakdown in communication, and we have people sitting in nursing homes who don't even speak to the people around them. When I first went into healthcare, I had a conversation with a patient that was at the nursing home facility where I was doing my CNA or Certified Nursing Assistants clinicals. He had been there for a long time and I was assigned to feed him at dinner time. Mind you, this was my first interaction with this human being. He wasn't feeling well. You could tell he felt under the weather. As I was feeding him, I started talking to him. He didn't say anything back, and one of the other CNAs across the room yelled over to me, "He doesn't talk. Don't waste your time." And my heart broke. I didn't know what to do because that person was actually carrying my grade and was responsible for passing me to the next shift. But I decided to keep talking to him because it felt wrong to not talk to him. As I sat there and I talked to him, literally rambling about anything that I could come up with, and his eyes met mine, and he said in an almost imperceptible whisper, "I do talk. They just don't ever listen." And this man spoke to me, and he told me how sick he was feeling. Over the course of our whispered dinner together, he told me that people had just assumed he couldn't talk, and they just started doing things for him, and so he let them. He told me he didn't need somebody to feed him, but they just took over because he was too slow. A lot of families I talk to tell me about how they are so afraid of taking over their parents' lives. And I get it. That was the wrong thing to do for that man. So it's important that we identify when we should step in and when we should not step in. And I know I talk about systems a lot, but it's really important that we have an evidence-based assessment that provides us with the data that we need to know how much intervention we should provide. What this assessment does is it actually identifies what level of intervention your family member needs. And in order to prevent us from jumping in too soon or jumping in too late, I give you the tools in here to know where we are and know what to do. It is not something that is overwhelming, and it will go very quickly for you to be able to read through this. It gives you the questions to talk about. It gives you the ability to be able to meet your parent right where they are so that you don't end up with your father sitting at a table saying, "They just don't listen to me." Almost exactly 2 years ago, my husband's parents, Don and Sandy, called us and asked to talk about what comes next. This is an extraordinary moment because not everyone is able to ask this question. I still have little people at home, 2 who are in middle school, and at that time we still had my 20-year-old son who is autistic living with us. At that time, I had never parented a neurotypical boy through middle school. And now I have 2. And now we're discussing bringing my in-laws to come live with us as well. That is a crisis waiting to happen. And so I started looking for structures. We talked about a couple weeks ago that there are so many structures surrounding the growing up of children. So I kind of had a general idea of what we were going to do. The boys were going to finish elementary school. We're going to move to middle school where they start to have more autonomy. They're more able to govern themselves. My type 1 diabetic son was going to be able to manage just a little bit more of his type 1 diabetes. And we were going to slowly move them towards high school, where they both would start driving, they both would get jobs, they would start being more independent and start planning for their future. Then we can pass them to college. They can go on and become who they would like to be. There's a structure, but there was no structure that allowed me to deconstruct my in-laws' lives as they started aging in a safe and controlled way. So I created it. The stress that the sandwich generation is holding when they are looking at trying to take care of their elementary school age kids and the need to take care of aging parents is overwhelming. There is no guidance or book really on how we're supposed to take care of the aging population and help them to deconstruct the life that they so carefully built from the time that they graduated high school until they got to this point. That is a scary endeavor. I meet families in complete overload. They are unable to even process new information. They are struggling because their brains are so overwhelmed with what do we do now? I was never good at algebra. It's not my forte. But the phrase, the math is not mathing, completely is relevant when we are talking about having young children in elementary school, middle school, high school, and taking care of our aging parents. If you look at an algebra equation, you've got U as the equal sign or the equalizer in the middle. And we all know that we have to balance the equation across the equal sign, which means that occasionally we have to borrow from the aging adults to be able to give to the young children. We also have situations where we have to borrow from the young children in order to be able to give to the aging adults. That work is exhausting, and how we figure out how to balance that equation truly comes down to structure, which is why I created Golden Hour Aging. Without a clear concept of how we take and move things across the equation to balance it, it just falls apart. Most equalizers are women. In my family, it actually is my husband. He's the one standing in the middle working on equalizing our family's equilibrium. In the sandwich generation, we are the equalizer between two different generations that rely on us, thus the sandwich. What I find is that the sandwich generation is what gets dropped when the two other generations get too heavy or the need becomes too great. We forget or stop going to our doctor's appointments. We don't take our blood pressure medication because we haven't had a chance to get it filled. We let ourselves go, which then drops the entire system, creating conflict in ourselves with guilt, feeling like we should be able to do all of this, but understanding that that's an impossible ask. When we let ourselves down as the equalizer between the two different generations, the aging population and our children, there is a deep resentment that forms. That resentment actually doesn't typically come out towards the aging adults or even the children first. The resentment comes out towards ourselves. We are angry with ourselves that we do not have the capacity to be able to hold everything that we expect ourselves to hold. And this is so damaging to us. The resentment that we have towards ourselves because we are not enough in our ability to be able to hold up two generations at the same time is the operational failure that collapses the system. When we do not have the capacity because we don't have the right systems in place where we are able to build a stepped structure around our parents aging, creates so much conflict and it creates an unstable structure, which is why I created the Golden Hour Aging phases of aging. When we know where we are in the phases of aging, we can then intervene in small bite-sized pieces that we can accomplish in a couple hours max every couple of months so that we can create the structure before it falls apart and crushes us. Most families blow past phase 1. A big number of families blow past phase 2. They don't even start asking for help until they reach phase 3 or phase 4 of the aging process. This skipping of phases creates a recipe for deep conflict within the family and with themselves. Again, because they are holding two generations at the same time, their aging parent and their children, waiting for crisis is the worst decision that we can make. The one conversation that most families miss is figuring out where they are. They are lost and they don't know how to find out where they are and what to do.